So few topics in the finance community create more debate about whether or not you should have a joint account when you're married.
What?
Do you keep them separate? Should you put them together? What's the right answer? Or is it something in between?
You can tell me. I mean, how bad could it be?
Well, we're gonna dive into that right now. And you know what? My opinion might surprise you a little bit and might be a little bit controversial.
Every couple should have 4 bank accounts. You have the one bank account where both of you put your check in, and that's your joint account. It pays bills, light, car notes, everything that's a necessity to live. The second account, a savings account, where you both agree to put X amount of dollars of that money in it, and it takes 2 signatures to move it. The third and fourth account, she should have her own bank account, and you should have your own bank account. She can do whatever she want to do. She ain't got to check with you and ask, and you can do whatever you want to do, and you ain't got to check with her and ask. And that way, guess what? The bills are paid, you have a roof over your head and a car to drive. You all are trying to save a little bit of money, and you gotta have your own life.
So welcome back to Money Ripples. I'm Chris Miles here. We're just gonna dive right in. Should you have joint checking accounts or joint accounts, especially when you're married, or should you have them separate?
We both have cards because we share a joint account.
Now we just saw Steve Harvey there talking about how to do both, right? A blended type strategy. But let's watch some more ideas about what they think. Again, is this for or against? Do we have joint or do we keep them separate?
When you get married, she wants to merge your bank accounts.
Red flag. You should have a joint account, but you should still also have your separate accounts.
Okay, so he's now saying, he's like, well, first it's a red flag if he wants to merge the accounts. I see why. Like if someone's like, let's combine our money. Please, let's combine our money. That would be a red flag. But he's even saying have a joint account, but then still have separate accounts. So far we've got 2 for 2 on the combination of it. Let's watch another one.
What advice do you have about combining finances with a partner? We're getting married in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks is not that long. I mean, my advice is to have started like a year ago. But if you can't do that, let's talk about what you can do now. Getting married is an amazing opportunity, symbolically and in all other ways, to turn the page and begin the new chapter of your life. And I love doing this with money because it gives you an excuse to sit down and talk about things that you normally would not talk about. Like it's perfectly normal to just go, hey babe, now that we got married, I'd love to sit down and talk about how we should set up our accounts. Whereas if you had done that before, or if you do that 3 years from now, it's gonna be kind of weird. A good thing to do would be to start using some of the questions in my journal, where I sit down and I encourage you to say, what is our rich life? What do we want to spend our money on? Where do we want to spend our time?
Okay, so a different take from Ramit's perspective here, which is really combine, talk about it, really figure out what that is, like combine the goals together rather than just combining the money together. So let's really just talk about these pros and cons here a little bit more, because I'm going to take it more from the side of what's the pros of being separate, right? Like having separate accounts, because that's the one thing you haven't heard a lot of, especially with the millennial generation that's becoming more popular. Which is interesting when you think about it, because millennials are actually known for banding together and working together. But at the same time, you kind of think about, they probably want their own independence too, right? They don't have to do everything together, including my money. Let's keep it separate. Not to mention if you want more freedom, it's great to have separate accounts. So I can see where that's the case. One other idea too, I've heard this from couples that I've worked with, is that sometimes when someone makes more money than the other, the person that makes more money feels like, well, all of my money is going to help pay for bills, while the person that makes less, their money goes to pay bills, but they still have their own money to spend too. What about me? I feel like I'm the only one being responsible, and proportionally speaking wise, I'm making a lot of money, and therefore shouldn't I get money back too? And there's a good argument for that as well, right? So that's one reason why some people might want to have separate accounts to say, well, I make more money. I'll contribute some to the household, you contribute some to the household, we'll work together that way. But if I make more, I want to keep more. And you can see how that makes sense. And so there's a lot of reasons to do that together. I like even what Steve Harvey said, like you have your own life. You should live your own life. I think the danger is when it's all or nothing, right? And that's when you go to the other side. What if it's all just joint? You have no separate accounts, you only have joint accounts. The pros to that is you're working together as a team. You're trying to problem solve together. Even if you have a challenge, maybe try to pay off debt, maybe trying to have a savings goal. Maybe you want to be financially free and create passive income, like what we talk about on this channel, right? You might be trying to do all those things. And so you're trying to come together to create this joint effort. And especially when you're married, that is a big deal. And there's even been statistics that came out in favor of this as well, saying that those that actually do have joint accounts when they combine their money together are happier and divorce less. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for this. If I were playing devil's advocate against that point, I'd say, well, of course they divorce less, because then it gets messy. If you don't have your separate accounts, if you have separate accounts, splitting up would be easier. Where you just say, listen, you take your money, I'll take mine. Even though we're supposed to split 50-50, I just want this done. Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
And you could do that. When it was joint, it's messier, right? You got to figure out how do you split it 50-50. You know, are there going to be emotions? What about like trying to split the income and deal with the kids and all that kind of stuff? It can get messier, and it's more of a commitment to do to get out of that marriage. And so there's definitely a reason to do that as well. Going back to the pros of having separate accounts, it could make sense having separate accounts if someone has bad spending behavior. Maybe they've even had addictions. Now, if that were the case, that should be a red flag, maybe not to get in the relationship, right? They have addictions, whether it's gaming addictions, drug addictions, whatever it might be. If they've got those addictions, gambling, those are things that you should be aware of. Now, they could have a separate account that they use that only can be doing that, and that's it. But you got to be careful, because what if they have credit cards? Is that going to affect your marriage? It creates a lot of tension. And in fact, some of the biggest stressors in marriage, actually is even bigger than money, is substance abuse.
Once an addict, always an addict.
And that's one of those deal breakers. And that can actually affect money, and it affect the relationship too. So going back to those that have joint accounts, the thing is, if you're going all in just joint, then here's what happens typically. And this is what I've seen in my experience working with a lot of couples, literally hundreds, if not into the thousands now, is that when a married couple has everything joint together, usually it's going to be one person that takes total control. Right? They're going to be the ones that usually more financially savvy, tend to be the better savers a lot of times. The one that's more the spender, they're just like, you handle it. I don't even like dealing with money. You got this. Well, the problem is this. What happens if you split up? What happens if all of a sudden you get divorced? What's going to happen to the person that doesn't know how to manage their money? That's another issue, right? Because you did everything joint, you let them take control of everything. I remember I went through a divorce myself with my previous wife. Now, when we were going through really hard times back in the last recession, she's like, it's just too much. Now, she knew how to manage her money when it was simpler math, simpler numbers, when she was single, living by her, as an adult by herself. But when we got married, it got more complex. And especially when there was business finances involved, and that's another reason to have separate accounts. If you have a business, they need to be separate. The business should be separate from your personal. Otherwise, you can get sued and people can get to all your money. But, I had business accounts that I had separate, but then we also had our joint accounts. We did everything joint together. And when everything got stressful, when all the collectors were calling and everything else, she's like, you know what? I can't handle all the emotions. It's too much. You take it over. So I did. And I took over our finances for the last several years of our marriage until our divorce. And I remember one time she actually texted me. She's like, you left me in the dark. I didn't know anything going on our finances. Are you hiding money? Or is it this? It's like all these accusations came out. Like she was like worried that she couldn't trust what was going on. Of course, you're going through a divorce. You don't trust anybody anymore, right? But still, for her, she's like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know I had these collections in my name for medical collections and things like this. Like it created a lot of stress for her because she was now taking on finances for the first time in a long time in our marriage. So this is my opinion. This is what I think works best. And there's a lot of evidence to support this too. And I actually agree with Steve Harvey. I'm going to just back him and say amen to Steve Harvey here, right? Is have your joint checking account. That's your bill paying account. Bring it together. And here's a key point I'll add to what he didn't say. Even if one person makes a lot more money than the other, or maybe they make all the money, still have that joint account working together that pays the bills. Throw it in there together.
We make them together.
Then from that joint checking account, then some of that money goes to savings. So some should still come out. I don't care if it's $1 a week or $1 a month or whatever it might be. Still have that money go into savings. So you have a joint checking and a joint savings account. Very important. In fact, most people don't even have a savings account in general that they're adding to. This is very important, but equally important. And I learned this in my marriage with my wife now, is that I was always the person that's like, hey, just throw it all in. Let's go all in joint, right? We're just all joint. And she loved joint too. But then even she taught me, she said, Chris, you should have your own separate account. And the truth is like, yeah, I was making a lot of the money, but I was just like, no, we just throw it all in. We're a team. That's how we become a team, right? We're working together towards our goal.
We make the decision together.
She's like, you still need your own money. Now, granted, I get less than 1% of my money paid back to me, okay? We have more going to savings than I have going into my own personal account. But for her, it actually saved her work because when she wanted to manage some of the household budgeting and expenses, she said, I want you to do stuff and, you can spend money on whatever you want, but I don't have to deal with all these little tiny transactions. Like if you go to a taco place, right? Or you get something like that. Or if you're going and doing running stuff, like deal with marathons and whatnot. She's like, I don't want to deal with all these little transactions. You're buying clothes or whatever it might be. I don't have to deal with that. So instead, here's your own account. The money always comes out. You track that, and then I'll manage the rest of the household as well as her own account that she has separate too. So we have 2 separate accounts for each of us. We have a joint checking account together and also a joint savings account that works as well. And I'll tell you, why didn't I do this earlier? It was so much better. I do like actually having my own checking account now because I always felt guilty spending money. I was that guy, right? In a lot of ways, I'm kind of like in our household relationship, I'm kind of like the housewife sometimes, even though I'm working too. But a lot of times I've always felt guilty. Like I had that guilt of, I don't want to spend anything. Everything's for the family. Put it all in. That's not the way to go, guys. I think it's good to have your own identity, your own interests and hobbies. Those things, heck, I even get my hair cut occasionally. There's not much of it left. But when I do get my hair cut, it comes out of that account. Even like I said, when I'm doing marathons and races, comes from that account, right? Even when I do things like, going and getting a little something, a snack on the road or whatever it might be, comes out of that account. It makes it very simple. I get to budget it and it works. Even my gym membership comes out of that account. Things that are just for me come out of there. And that works. That's a great way to be able to make life work as you as a couple so you can both be happy individually, but still be working together as a couple.
Together, we can make a difference.
So here's some 3 additional tips for your marriage finances to help you work. So number 1 is work together to keep tracking your money. Track your money each and every month at minimum, if not weekly. Track the money that's coming in and the money that's going out. So important. So many couples don't do this. And especially they don't know what's going on and they're not on the same page. This is very important to watch your money. When you watch your money, you'll recapture more of your money. That's the one thing that's inevitable. You don't have to go live on rice and beans. You can actually just by watching your money, watching how much money you're spending, you will naturally make wiser decisions with that money. Number 2, I suggest that you guys are open and transparent. Be open about the money you're spending. I cannot tell you how many relationships were on the verge of divorce or did divorce of clients that we worked with because they weren't being transparent. I remember I had one client where she said, Chris, and she was only working with me. She didn't have her husband involved at all. So she hired us. She said, Chris, I don't know what to do because I've got about $100,000 of credit card bills that my husband doesn't know about. And her husband was working as a firefighter. So it wasn't like he was raking in the dough. She was kind of more of a entrepreneur. She wasn't making a whole lot of money herself. She made a little bit of money, but then she had just recently started to hit retirement age. And so I said, here's what you need to do. Tell him. Be upfront to say, this is my situation. You got to face the music. Be open and honest with him. And was he pissed? Oh yeah, he was pissed. But I also advise her too is to take responsibility for it. Tell him, listen, I will find a way to pay for it. You don't worry about it. You keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to find a way to pay for it. And that's what we did. We worked on ways of how we could pay off that debt steadily and slowly and surely to the point where eventually she could be debt free. That, my friends, that is a key benefit is that you need to be open and transparent. Some people call it financial infidelity when you end up spending money on things, you don't tell your spouse about it. That's like cheating. It breaks trust. You want to have that trust in your marriage. And then the third and last thing is that it's okay to change your strategy as time goes on. Make it work for how your situation works. Because I'm not going to claim I know your situation, right? That's why I don't believe in the all or nothing methods like some of these gurus out there are trying to teach you and they're shame you for this stuff. No, every individual situation is different. The key is that you guys are working on it together and you decide and agree on it together. That's what's important, and that's what makes your bond stronger in your marriage and with your money. Speaking about people married and using their money together, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, pretty cool people, right? Here's some of the things that they've done to actually create more wealth. You can find out how they do that right here. All right, it's a big debate out there. Do you have joint accounts or do you keep them separate? And there's a lot of debate between financial advisors and experts out there, and they're all arguing about it, right? Some say joint only, and some say hey, it's okay to have separate. Well, that's what we're going to talk about in our next video here.